Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining. Today's video is a little bit different than my normal content. If you are new here, I normally talk about health, wellness, lifestyle, adventure, fashion, you name it. More so than not, I don't really talk about too much of my personal life outside of that. But if you do follow me on social media, you probably have seen that my family has been going through some crazy tough times this past year. This video, trigger warning, is talking about grief, loss, death, and an experience that me and my family have had with cancer. So if that is something that you're interested in, I'd love for you to stay. I think this video is really designed to be educational. It is going to be kind of tough to talk about because it's the first time I'm doing this since the things have happened. However, it's very important that I get this message out to people. I feel it's really important for people to hear my experience, my family's experience, for what we've gone through. But if that is not something that you want to listen to, definitely feel free to skip this video. I will not be offended, but I think it's really important. So if you stick around, thank you so much. So, as I mentioned, my family has been going through a lot of trauma this past year. Again, if you're following me on my other socials like TikTok or mainly Instagram, I will say that you probably already know. My father was diagnosed in May of this year with stage 4 colorectal cancer. He has since passed. In November, he passed. I said I was going to try to get through this without crying, but that probably won't happen. So I just wanted to share his story and his experience from my vantage point. Obviously, like, I can't give you his true experience because that is his and his alone. But I just wanted to share like his experience with that type of cancer. I also wanted to, what the main reason and point of this video is I wanted to share our experience with hospice care. I do want to start off by saying this is our perspective and experiences alone. It does not represent every single hospice care facility out there. It does not represent anybody else's experience. It is merely our own, and this is just for educational purposes. I won't be naming what hospitals or doctors or anything like that, whether they were great or bad. I just want people to understand like what the experience has been and the education that I learned along the way, so that hopefully it can help you or loved ones or people that you're close to just have more research and make more educational decisions based off of other people's experiences. And I hope that I can help in any shape possible. And what I feel is very traumatic. So let's kind of back up a couple steps, and I want to share a little bit about my dad's story. My dad in May was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. How it happened was he was like, I think he was working on like his cars or something, and he had just like really immense stomach pain. He just like wasn't feeling great all weekend. He kind of just brushed it off, and then at one point it got to the point where he was like in immense pain in like his stomach area. So he is not the type of person that's like, oh, I'm gonna go to the doctors or the ER or the urgent care for like anything minor. Like, it was excruciating. So he went to the urgent care, and they immediately like took him into surgery and found that he actually had a mass that was pushing against his appendix, so causing like, in a sense, appendicitis or like a flare up. And that was the pain that he was experiencing. But within them going in to do an appendectomy, they actually noticed that he had a cyst. It was pretty large. I don't want to like misquote how large it was, but I think it was like the size of a golf ball, if not bigger, pushing up against his appendix. And so that was removed and it was tested for cancer. And that is when they discovered that he did have stage 4 cancer. From that time on, there were a lot of things that happened, like genetic testing to see what type of gene it was KRAS, which was a really like difficult to fight cancer. The doctors were really optimistic though that he was young and his body could, handle the chemo treatments and beat it. And like, we were feeling like very optimistic. As he progressed, the cancer metastasized to his liver. Or actually had already metastasized when they took the cyst out, I think, but just not as bad. But it was rapidly metastasizing over the course of 3 months as he went through chemo. So by the end of his life, it had metastasized quite a bit. So again, backing up, he started chemo treatments that were designed specifically for this type of cancer gene. He also was like trying to still like, take care of himself, eating, doing all the things. So he was, fighting it really well initially. We did a couple of rounds of this first dose of chemo and it unfortunately did not work. So we moved to a different chemo drug, which was more aggressive on his body, and it actually took him out. Like, he started to like have immense pain. He like couldn't sleep. He wasn't eating. He wasn't drinking. So by like September, he just was fighting as hard as he could. But the chemo just was not working. We didn't know that at the time, but like, it just obviously was not. It was taking a toll on him. So in end of September, he ended up actually going to the emergency room because his vitals were not stable. And it was discovered that he actually had 2 pulmonary embolisms that ended in their final destination, which were his lungs, but also his lungs had the cancer in them. Like, it had metastasized a little bit to his lungs. But not as much as like his liver. It also did metastasize to some of his ribs at that point, and this was the end of September. So he then was placed on blood thinners, and he was slowly declining. Like, his food intake was not great. His fluids were still good. He was trying to like go through chemo and do all the things, but the chemo itself was taking a large toll on him and his body. So fast forward through October, things are getting extremely worse. They did end up doing like a pause in chemo treatment just because his body was not able to handle it, and his white cell count was like extremely low. From there, he repeated a PET scan, and that PET scan did come back and say that like the chemo was not working, it was spreading. And so at that point, it was the last week of October. It was actually Halloween. And the following day, the doctor had a meeting with us, family and him, and let him know that we were going to be moving to Comfort Care, which is hospice. And he was at the final stages of his life. So my sister and I and Binks and my boyfriend had drove out the following day to be with him. And we knew that he was going to be put on hospice care. At least that was the option that was provided to us, and that was recommended by his doctors. So when we got there, and I'm going to kind of transition into what the hospice experience is like, because when I thought of hospice, and again, this is me not having a medical background, I have no knowledge of it. I just know like what I've experienced, like when I many lifetimes ago worked as an EMT. But then I also like, you think of like the things you see on TV. So I just want to preface this by saying, again, this is my experience. This is, my experience lived with my family through this, and this is not like represent all hospice facilities. I won't be naming what hospice facility we went through, because this is not about negatively like reviewing a specific care team or a specific person or anything like that. Again, like on the internet, it's about my shared experience about hospice as a whole. And if you have specific questions and you live in the general like Northern California area and you have questions about specific hospitals or people that we had and want recommendations, I'm happy to give those to you. And you can DM me directly on my social media at Team Fearless Fitness on Instagram. Or you can email me at coachtina.teamfearlessfitness@gmail.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions directly through there. But I'm not going to like go on a public forum and just like shit on the care teams. Because again, like I think the intention for good is there. It just is, that was not delivered. So again, I digress. So let's get into hospice. And I think going through this will help me not cry on camera anymore. Here is where I'm like, I understand this and I don't understand. Okay. What a hospice program is focused on comfort, not curative care, which I understand. Okay, there is no cure. You're at the end of your life. We want you to be comfortable. Where I don't understand and where I get a little confused is the comfort piece. The whole purpose of providing all of this information, all of these things, these services, is to provide the patient comfort, no pain, be able to pass in peace in their houses. That what was told to us by the care team that was there presenting hospice to us, it is not what happened in our experience. We never got a home health aide. So bathing, changing, all of those things never happened for my dad. We had to do them all of ourselves. Okay. What I thought the nurse would be helping us do is administer the pain medication. That's not what ever happened. Never once did the nurse actually provide the pain medication. They would stand there and watch us force it down my dad. They only came and took vitals and assessed and gave the answer of, it's close, he's going to pass soon. Now, mind you, they said that for literally 3 days. My dad did not pass until he was actually in the hospital setting. You can see my frustration by that conflicting messaging that we were given. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about just the experience in itself. So my dad at first declined hospice care. He wanted to wait and see. So we went through, this was Sunday. On Monday, he was having a really bad experience and it was getting worse, his pain. And I don't want to go into too much nit and grit here. But it was to the point where he was like, okay, let's elect hospice care because they're supposed to make me not feel this much pain, right? Now, you probably can't take away all of the pain. I understand that. I'm not naive to that. But I will say the idea of comfort care is so that you are comfortable, whatever that looks like. But he was never comfortable. Like, he was in immense pain. So he decided that he would agree to bring on the hospice care team. So we had the hospice care team and the social workers back at the house on Monday to assign us a nurse coordinator, the doctors, everybody that I went through with you. My dad was still cognitive. He was still verbal and he was still semi-moving around, but not great. Okay. But he was not like, never once did I get that he was in the end stages of his life or that he would pass within the next day. Like, never did I get that from him and how he was feeling. Now, okay. So first I want to say that I had mixed, like, I don't know if it's like feedback or like I had mixed things shared with me about when someone is put on hospice. So what people that I've been close to and people that have experienced this had been telling me was once someone goes on hospice, that's kind of like, that's it. They don't have a lot of time. Like, they usually pass within a couple of days. Like, it's very quick. And then I had the hospice people telling me that dad could be on hospice for weeks, months. Like, it depends on the person, which I think could be true. But I think where the pitfall is here is that the doctors were let me rephrase that. The oncology doctors in hospice team was very much not on the same page of where my dad was in his stage of the end of his life. I will say that I got no understanding or clarification from the doctor that my dad was going to be passing in the next week. I did not get any confirmation that he thought that, or that there were like data points to back that. I also did not, and I got the opposite from the hospice care team, that he was in the end stages, he had hours. So I had very mixed like thought process of where my dad was in his final days. Let's start from the beginning. So hospice comes to your house to talk to the patient and the patient's family. So they came to talk to my dad and to talk to my mom and my sister and I about what what would happen and what they provide and the services they provide. Mind you, these are registered nurses that come to your house to provide assistance. Like, my thoughts and understanding of what they provide would be things that nurses do. So delivering pain meds, changing diapers, bed sheets, taking vitals, like triaging situations, etc. That's what I thought they would do because that's what nurses are trained to do. Now, I am not trained to do that. I'm not a licensed medical professional. Like, sure, I can take some vitals. I was an EMT. I can take some vitals. But if I wasn't an EMT in my past life, I am not trained to do any of those things, okay? I feel like I'm going on a little tangent here, but bear with me. So they come in and they tell you what they offer, and they give you a couple things. So they give you a packet, okay, of papers, and I'm going to cover the names because this is not about shaming institutions. This is about explaining what you get. They go through a few different things before you sign a hospice care. They go through a patient's rights statement. They talk about patient's responsibility. They talk about compensation and pain for hospice care, so like insurance, all of like the nit and grit of, paperwork. Then they talk about what's included in a hospice program, and that's what I want to go through today. Page 6. Okay. So your team consists of a nurse case manager, a physician, which is a hospice physician, a social worker, a chaplain. They also talk about therapy services. Volunteers, they talk about how you have access to volunteers, medical equipment, medication, and that is what's included in your plan. That's like the team that's included in your plan. I will say that we spoke to the social workers who were semi-helpful. We never talked to the physician at all until my dad was at the end of his life and actually admitted to a hospital. We'll get there. We did have a chaplain come in way too soon because the hospice nurses said that my dad was dying. He had hours. We had a chaplain come in. My dad did not die for another 4 days. And we had the nurses. We had a nurse case manager, actually. I will redact that. We had a nurse case manager. She did come in. Not very helpful. They did provide all of the equipment, which I do think is helpful. I will say, again, this is this particular hospice company, whatever. This is not a reflection of all hospice companies, but the bed looked, it was from like 1902. Very kind of rickety janky, not like a true hospital bed at all. It was like metal frames, like just very basic, Mattress, thin, could feel the springs on it. Not comfortable for someone who has cancer that is spread to their spine, okay? Just not a great experience from the get-go. They did provide oxygen. They did say that they would provide an alternative pressure mattress to help with pressure wounds. Never got the pressure mattress whatsoever. Didn't have time because by the time they actually sent it when we asked for it initially, my dad was already transferred to the hospital at that point. They did provide like some other supplies like dressing and wound, actually they didn't even provide wound care. They just provided diapers and some pads that you could sit down, like, you know, put under the patient. I forgot what they're called. Anyways, and then obviously all the medications, they provided that. Okay. So, that's unpredictable. Okay. So I'm not blaming that on anybody else. It just things progressed. So anyways, we bring on the hospice. Oh my gosh. We bring on the hospice care team, and first off, I do want to say that like the nurse that is assigned the care should be working with your previous pain doctor, like your previous pain management doctor and your oncologist, to understand what were the medications that you as a patient were on, or that your family members on, or your friends on, or whatever, to understand how to transition them into the pain regimen or the pain management routine that they are going to be administering, okay? Because that did not happen. And my dad's pain medications, I think, were the cause of why he was in so much pain. Anyways, I digress about that. So I do think it's really good to advocate, like, hey, these are all the things that that I am on, that I take on a regular basis. Like, how are you going to make sure that like I'm getting the same amount of things and nothing is like crazily altered, so that you're not like feeling this immense pain. So at a certain point, and I couldn't even tell you, I think it was like within a day, he became nonverbal. And I know that is something that happens as someone who has cancer and is at the end of their life. But I didn't expect it to happen that fast. And he was still like, even though he couldn't speak, he was still aware. He still could hear. He still would like move his eyes around and whatnot. And so they kept saying like, he has hours to live, like, you know, call the chaplain in, do all the things. And that just wasn't the case. And they kept making those assumptions without actually assessing and knowing him, like knowing for sure. And it just was a total mind fuck. Like, to sit here and think that you're saying your goodbyes and then for him not to pass and then for him to be in so much pain. So we get to, I mean, it's this constant up and down of him being in excruciating pain and them telling us just to force more medication down his throat, and like, you know, the trauma that you see by looking at someone that you love going through so much pain, but also not wanting to be drugged and not understanding like what is happening, because they were talking one day and now they're not, and you're hovering over them trying to administer medication. I'm telling you, is the most traumatic thing that someone could ever experience. And these nurses just did not care. They did not care that the family was going through this, like, such a traumatic experience. Their solution was just give them more medication. Just give them more medication. And so it got to the point where Friday night, it was so bad. Like, he was in so much pain. We couldn't move him to move his bedding. It took the four of us. And again, if you've been following me for a while, you know I'm into health and fitness. I'm pretty strong. My sister's also into health and fitness, very strong. My boyfriend was in the military, very strong. Like, my mom, semi-strong. But like, you know, we're like tough. Like, we can do shit. And we could not even get my dad in a situation, like in a position to where he did not feel any pain or like try to move him or anything. Like, we didn't know how to like change him, to get the sheets out, like to do all the things. They never showed you any of that. We were just going from like what we knew, or like, YouTubing, like how to do something, to not hurt him. And they like did not give us any education on that whatsoever. And everything was read the book, read this, do this. The book I'm talking to you about, I will show you after. It's a very detailed book, but it got to the point where if someone had like showed my sister that book one more time, she was going to like be completely unhinged, which very valid. So after just being completely like wrecked, from trying to get my dad to not feel pain, and just seeing how much he was suffering and calling these nurses after hours. There is a daily, and an after hours care, and hospice team. And we would call these nurses, and I understand that we are not the only people going through this. And so I want to be respectful and cognizant of that. But, I felt that when you triage people, like when someone is calling and so distressed and telling you how much pain their person is in and how they can't figure out how to control it, and they've given them max dose, and you just continue to ignore them and don't call them back and don't show up like you're supposed to, that to me is poor hospice care. That to me is just poor care in general. And again, like, these are our experiences. It may not be that for everybody. Some people may have really good hospice experiences, but we did not. And so the final straw was that ignoring of, you know, like, hey, we are doing everything you were telling us to do, and yet nothing is working. He is in immense pain. Like, he is restless. Like, none of the medicine is working. So now what? We basically had to threaten that if you don't help us, we're just going to cancel hospice and call 911 and get him the care he needs to be comfortable, because this is insane. This is not comfort care. He is literally suffering because of you. So, they finally, after saying that, my sister was like, so livid, and I think they could tell, they agreed that we were no longer able to provide. To be completely honest, we never were able to provide him comfort care, because we are not fucking nurses. We're not doctors. Like, we're not medical professionals. And like, yes, my sister is in the medical field and she does her things. This is not her job. She's a family member first. And that to me was just so like, you know, kind of like, oh, well, your sister's a nurse, or your sister's like, whatever. Like, she should be able to handle it. It's like, absolutely not. Like, we're family members in this situation. We are not medical professionals. You are the medical professional here. You should be making the judgment calls. And like, when we are calling you and telling you that we are at our limits and we have done everything that you told us to do, and we have maxed out on his doses of medication, like, you should be the one being like, okay, this is not working. We need to have another solution. But instead we were met with, well, I don't know, like, just give him more meds, just give him more meds. And to me, that's like, if you don't have a solution to what potentially could happen if all this stuff doesn't work, that is shitty care. And you should probably rethink your career. Not to be a dick, but like, you probably should. Or at least that company should rethink like the way they do things. So anyways, getting a little fired up here because I'm still, again, in the grieving process, and it goes between like being sad and like being super fucking pissed when I relive this. But I think it's so important because I think, you know, I just feel like not a lot of people know. And if I can help someone with the experience that we've had, and you can ask the right questions to make sure that this doesn't happen to you and make sure that you do have a really good care team, that is the takeaway I want from this. Okay, again, it's not to like shit on people, because if it was, I would be naming names and facilities, but we're not. This is literally just, it's my experience to be able to share with you what we went through so that y'all can figure out like the right questions to answer, because I'll be honest, I didn't know. And had I seen someone's experience video, or someone had like shared in depth about their experience, I probably would have had a lot more questions, or at least would have felt a little bit more prepared going into this. And I didn't feel prepared at all. So if there's one thing you can take away, is I hope that you feel prepared from listening to my experience. To that night, they agreed to finally get an ambulance to come and take my father to the hospital. The one thing I will say though is they tell you if you call 911 before calling them, and you take your loved one to the hospital, they will revoke their hospice care. I don't know how hard it is to get back on hospice if you revoke it and the hospital sends you home. So that also was looming in the back of our mind, which is why we didn't initially call 911 at first, because we didn't want to risk losing the hospice care. So that threat there, already not a great experience. So the ambulance comes, the firefighters come, it takes the whole fire team plus the paramedic, or the whole fire team plus the EMT. I was talking to the paramedic with my sister, to move him so that he was not in pain, from the house to the ambulance, get him in the ambulance. I rode in the back of the ambulance with him, and I can tell you that it was the most traumatizing experience because it was the last one I had with him. He was awake, and in immense pain, but again, nonverbal, but I think coherent enough. And I just kept talking to him and telling him what happened and where we were going and why we were going to the hospital, just so that he felt some sort of comfort and that I was never leaving his side. As soon as we got to the hospital, the care team, amazing. I will say, the care team, he had doctors, surgeons, nurses at this hospital in particular. Prestige, just so kind, so comforting from the time he was diagnosed up until his very last breath. Just amazing hospital team. So to have such a negative hospice experience was disheartening, to say the least. So we get there, again, doctors, care team, it's like Saturday, no, is it Saturday morning? To be honest, I can't really remember. I think it's Saturday morning. No, I'm sorry. It's Sunday at like 1 a.m. So it's Sunday early morning. We get him there. He's in a lot of pain. And the lovely thing about bringing him to the hospital was that he has a port. So he immediately got medication through the port. Vitals calmed down. He was relaxed. You could visibly see that he was not in pain. And he was admitted to the hospital and transferred to the hospital, basically out of the ER and into a hospital room. Within like 3 hours, like so fast. They got his pain under control and managed, and then moved him to his own room. The hospital, amazing. Again, the nurses got my sister and I like blankets, and like my sister and I had like a separate hospital bed in his own private room, and like they really just took care of us, and they were the most amazing humans I have ever met. And it just really was comforting, coming from such a shitty hospice experience to such an amazing hospital experience, I will say. It really was comforting at the time. So, from that moment on, my dad got his pain medication continuously through his port. It was probably the most comforted I've felt, because I knew he wasn't in pain. He never woke up from that moment. He was asleep the whole time. But like, I will say, like, it was comforting knowing that he was like at peace and like finally not in any pain. I do want to circle back to the hospice stuff, beforehand, I forgot to mention, is this book they give you. Okay, it's called Gone From My Sight, and it's the dying experience. And I will say that this person, Barbara Carnes, she's an RN. I think that, like, it's very well written. It says, I wrote Gone From My Sight for my hospice patient's family. I wanted them to follow their special person's dying process and be able to see what was normal and what wasn't, when not to worry and when to call for help. Okay. I do want to say that this book is very much, like, it's intense to read. It gives you, like, a summary of what to see and changes this book, right? Whatnot, like days, hours, whatnot. And I will say, like, sometimes he had some of these things, but, like, he never had all of them, and it wasn't, like, to a T. Like, you know, he would have, like, some of the things that they say that were 1 to 3 months, and then he'd have some of the things that were days to hours, and then other days he'd have some of the 1 to 2 weeks, and, like, it just was so, like, not consistent. And so the hospice care team kept being like, refer to the book, read the book. Read the book. And I'm like, okay, well, this, and this is not happening, or this, and this is happening, so now what? And they'd be like, I don't know, read the book. You're a medical professional. You should know, or you should at least have some suggestions on what to do. So that was a negative, another negative experience about this stupid book. It's not stupid, but, like, you know, it's a frustrating, like, not, like, I don't know. I'd say it's not, like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's, like, it's a good, like, thing to read and know, so you know what you're experiencing, but I don't think every single person is going to follow exactly what that book is even saying, if anybody actually follows that, because I think the dying process is unique to every single person, and I can guarantee you that my dad did not go through those stages in the exact order, or experience the exact symptoms that are in each stage. Like, everybody is different. So if someone just keeps telling you to read the book, like, tell them to fuck off. Like, because it's not, like, the book isn't going to tell you what you need to know or how to help your family members. It's just going to give you an idea of what to expect. So while we were in the hospital, again, I'm kind of jumping back and forth here because I didn't want to forget the book thing because it was so important to talk about, but circle back to the hospital. My dad is, again, like, not responsive, but his vitals are stable. Like, he has strong, like, breath sounds. He's not in any pain. Like, they ended up putting they call it a condom catheter. And it's, in a sense, just, like, a way for him to continue to use the bathroom and produce urine, which they didn't offer in hospice. They don't offer that kind of stuff. Well, my dad was not getting up to use the bathroom, and changing him and rolling him over and all of the things were causing him immense pain. It should have been an option for him at home. So I think that is something that hospice, like, I don't know, if I go into, like, advocacy for hospice patients, I think for people that is something that I would advocate for, because, you know, imagine if there wasn't 4 of us there. Imagine if it was just my mom. How is she going to change my dad? Like, what? So when they put that on him, he was still producing urine up into the point of him passing. And so it was just a really good way for them to be able to not have to roll him or move him. And so that was amazing that they did that. So now that my dad is in the hospital setting, his pain is being managed. He is comfortable. You can physically see that he's not struggling or in pain, and he's peaceful. So that gives us a sense of peace. That trauma started to fade away from us. He's in the hospital all day Sunday. The hospice doctor was supposed to come in and talk to us on Monday morning. Now, he did not come in. He sent a nurse, or, like, some sort of representative from the hospice care team over to the hospital to talk to us about our options, and basically was, like, threatening to like send my dad home. So if my dad had not passed in the hospital, like within the 4-day window that they approve for you to be in the hospital and get that care, they were to send him home again so that we could then push medications orally, which my dad is nonverbal. He is non-responsive at this point. He can't even open his mouth. I do want to caveat with that when we were trying to put meds in that way and he was in so much pain, he was not able to swallow. We let the nurse team know that, the hospice nurse team know that, and they still said, keep pushing it, put it on his cheek. By the time my dad got to the hospital and his medical assistant was swabbing his mouth, there was caked medication in his cheek because it was not absorbing. And we kept telling the nurse team that he is not absorbing it through his cheek like he's supposed to. So now what? And they just kept saying, give it to him. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. So anyway, circle back to what I was saying about them trying to release him home. That was their plan. And so they were like, well, you know, at Ford, he's already been in here for a day. We retro it because it goes back to the last day or some bullshit like that for billing. And they were going to send him home if he didn't pass. The nursing staff and the doctors that knew my dad and also had been taking care of him were like, no way in freaking hell are we allowing him to go home? Like, this doesn't make any sense. There's no way that these girls are going to be able to give him the care. We'll be right back where we started. So again, the hospital team and the nurses advocated for him to stay until he passed, regardless if it was 4 days or not. The hospital was like, don't worry about it. Like, we got your back. Like, basically, like, we're going to tell the hospice team exactly what we think, and that's that your dad is not stable enough to be transported back into a home setting. And so I really appreciated that because we were freaking out, and it went back into like trauma mode about having to like see my dad suffer more. And so that was amazing that we were able to do that. They came in that afternoon and basically like said like, hey, by the way, we talked to the hospice team. We advocated for your dad. Like, you're good. Don't worry about it. And he will be here like until he, like as long as he needs to be. So that was fantastic. And shortly after, you know, we were all there at the hospital, and it was about probably like 9 o'clock, like 9 p.m. at night, where we started to notice like dad had some like breathing changes a little bit more aggressively, higher heart rate, slower breaths. And so we kind of knew that he was about to pass. And so we were all around him, and we were able to like, my sister was playing like his favorite songs. Earlier in the day, the harp lady came in and played some of his songs that he liked to listen to when he was at treatment. And it just was like such a peaceful and loving moment, and it wasn't traumatizing, and he wasn't in pain, and we were all around him when he passed that night. And I will say that I'm so thankful and blessed that he was transferred to the hospital so that he could pass in peace and not be in any pain, because what we experienced on hospice care was traumatic, not just for us, but for him as well. And I didn't want those to be his last memories, were, you know, us trying to force feed him medications to make him feel better when he didn't know what or why anything was happening. And so, this is a really long video, but like I said, if it is so important that you hear and, listen to the experiences of those around you, whether they're good or bad. You know, I think that it's really helpful to have shared experiences to make decisions on, and also to ask the questions that are necessary to make sure you're getting the appropriate care for you, your family members, or a loved one. It's just so important. It's something that I had wished I had, and I knew after that experience that I wanted to share on my channel, and I wanted people to hear the experience, even if it was hard to relive it, because I knew it was just so important for people to get that information. And I think all in all, like, I hope that other people have had a different experience and have had really good hospice experiences. And I hope that hospice care facilities can advocate for change if they don't provide a decent experience. And I hope that, you know, I will be providing my feedback directly to the hospice team when the time is right. I'm still grieving and processing, but I needed to share and get this out there. I think it's helping me with my healing, kind of recognizing and acknowledging all the things that I've went through and my family has gone through and my dad went through. So that's why I wanted to start with this educational video first, on my experience, and then I will be sharing the specific feedback with those teams. And I also, what I never like to do is shit on something without a solution. It's never been my MO. It's not how I operate in life. And so I wanted to thoroughly get my thoughts together and provide specific areas of feedback and solutions for these hospice care teams so that they can make sure that they do the work to improve so that other families don't have to go through what we went through in order to get my dad the care that he deserved. All in all, to say, the one positive thing out of this is that he had an amazing nursing staff and doctor staff at the hospital at the end of his life, and he passed in peace, and we were all with him. And I know that he's with me. He was a big fan of my YouTube channel, like my #1 fan. And so I know that he's going to be with me as I like continue to do the things that I love and share, and all of the videos that I make. I know he's going to be like right there cheering me on and keep watching my videos, you know. But I felt like a sense of like advocacy that I had to share this. So if you stayed until the end of this really long video, thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you listening to my dad's story and hearing our experience with hospice care and end-of-life care. It's not an easy thing to talk about. It's very hard to relive the situation, but it's very necessary for people to hear different perspectives and experiences on what this is like, because I feel like cancer is very common. If you haven't been personally affected by it, you know someone who's affected by it. And I honestly think that education is so powerful and shared experiences are so powerful. And I really hope that like this helps you learn about what it potentially could be like on hospice care. And I think that like asking the right questions and making sure that, you know, you're advocating for your family members is so important. And I think that's, if you take away one thing from this video, it's that advocacy should be the top of your list as a family member, as a friend, as a person, as a patient. Medical advocacy is so important. And if you think that something is not right, and if you think that something is not accurate, or if you have questions and people are pushing you off or telling you, you know, just look at a book or just give them more meds, and you feel like that's wrong, it is your right to push back and advocate for better care. And I hope that this inspires you to be your own advocate, but also advocate for others as well. So I really appreciate you sticking around and watching this video. If you liked this video and you think it could be helpful for other people, please share it. I'd appreciate that you share it. That's what I shared today. So again, I thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.